Imagine watching a cartoon in the late 90s and laughing at a silly joke about Disney owning Fox, something that felt completely impossible at the time. Now, fast forward 20 years, and that joke becomes a $71 billion reality that changes the face of Hollywood forever. How did The Simpsons know? Was it just luck, clever satire, or something more mysterious? For over 30 years, The Simpsons has entertained us with humor, satire, and oddly accurate glimpses of the future. From Donald Trump's presidency to smartwatches, and even major world events, this animated family has stunned viewers with its mysterious foresight. But one prediction stands out as one of the most shocking in entertainment history. The moment The Simpsons hinted that Disney would one day buy 20th Century Fox. When we think of The Simpsons, the first thing that usually comes to mind is its humor, its satirical look at American family life, and its endless list of quirky characters. But for millions of fans around the world, The Simpsons is far more than just a cartoon. Over time, it has become something almost prophetic. It's not just a TV show anymore. It's a cultural phenomenon, a piece of modern history that has somehow managed to predict events that no one could have possibly imagined at the time. And this isn't just one or two predictions. We are talking about dozens of moments where fans rewatched old episodes only to discover that what seemed like an outrageous joke years earlier had turned into shocking reality. That's why people say The Simpsons isn't just comedy. It's a mirror that reflects society, politics, technology, and even global events with uncanny accuracy. The phenomenon started slowly. In its early seasons during the 1990s, the show was already known for being ahead of its time. Its writers would take inspiration from politics, celebrity culture, and current events, exaggerating them for laughs. But in the process, they often touched on ideas that were considered far-fetched, unrealistic, or absurd. Nobody really thought those storylines could ever come true. And yet, over the years, reality seemed to bend toward those jokes. Take, for example, the episode that aired in the year 2000, where Lisa becomes President of the United States. In that episode, she casually mentions that she inherited quite a budget crunch from President Trump. At the time, this was a throwaway gag, a ridiculous joke meant to parody Trump's fame and ego. Nobody believed he would ever run for president, let alone win. But then, in 2016, when Donald Trump became the 45th president of the United States, fans immediately went back to that episode and were stunned. How could The Simpsons have gotten that so right? And it doesn't stop there. The show hinted at technological advancements long before they existed. In 1995, the episode Lisa's Wedding showed characters using a kind of smartwatch to communicate, something that was pure science fiction at the time. But years later, Apple and other companies brought smartwatches into reality, making that cartoon gag eerily accurate. Similarly, The Simpsons depicted video calls, autocorrect fails, and even the creation of inventions that look remarkably like today's real devices. Even world events were strangely anticipated. Back in 1993, an episode featured a mysterious outbreak from Asia, spreading illness to Springfield. At the time, it was just a parody of panic culture. But after the global COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, fans connected the dots, once again calling it another chilling prediction. By now, The Simpsons' reputation as a prophetic show is impossible to ignore. The media has picked up on it countless times, and fans online regularly circulate lists of all the events the series supposedly predicted. From Disney's eventual purchase of Fox to Lady Gaga performing at the Super Bowl suspended by wires, to the invention of the Higgs boson particle, the examples pile up until it feels less like coincidence and more like some kind of strange foresight hidden within the show. Of course, many people argue that the reason behind this pattern is less about prophecy and more about satire. The Simpsons has been on air for over 3 decades, producing more than 700 episodes. With that much content, it's almost inevitable that some of its storylines will line up with reality. After all, the writers are some of the sharpest satirists in the entertainment industry. always analyzing trends, exaggerating possibilities, and poking fun at the direction society might take. Sometimes, those exaggerations end up becoming true simply because the world itself is unpredictable and absurd. But fans don't see it that way. To them, The Simpsons has become a kind of modern-day oracle. People watch old episodes not just for the comedy, but also to hunt for hidden predictions, small details, or jokes that might one day become headlines. There's even a whole internet culture dedicated to documenting and debating which predictions have come true, which ones might still come true, and whether the writers of the show are doing it intentionally. And while skeptics dismiss it as coincidence or satire, the fact remains: the number of accurate predictions is too high, too specific, and too shocking for people to simply ignore. That's why every time a major world event happens, fans immediately rush to see if The Simpsons called it first. It has become a cultural reflex. This reputation of prediction has turned The Simpsons into more than a sitcom. It's now a strange historical archive, one that both entertains and mystifies. The show isn't just telling jokes, it's sparking conversations about fate, coincidence, and whether art has the power to anticipate reality. And when we talk about their most famous predictions, one of the most jaw-dropping examples is the Disney and Fox merger, a moment that went from a small throwaway gag to one of the largest entertainment deals in history. Back in 1998, The Simpsons aired an episode that, at the time, felt like nothing more than another clever joke at the expense of corporate America. The episode was titled "When You Dish Upon a Star," and it revolved around Homer Simpson befriending Hollywood celebrities Alec Baldwin and Kim Basinger. On the surface, it was a lighthearted story about fame, celebrity obsession, and the clash between ordinary life in Springfield and the glitz of Hollywood. But hidden in the background of one particular scene was a detail that would only reveal its true importance decades later. During this episode, eagle-eyed fans noticed something small yet powerful, a sign outside the 20th Century Fox studio. But this wasn't just any sign. Written clearly beneath the iconic logo were the words, "A division of Walt Disney Co." At the time, this was purely satire, a playful jab by the writers who loved to poke fun at the media industry and the growing power of conglomerates. Disney was already a dominant force in entertainment in the 1990s, and Fox was one of its strongest competitors. The joke was meant to be absurd, a kind of satirical what-if that nobody ever truly considered possible. The thought of Disney owning Fox seemed ridiculous, like a gag only meant to exaggerate Disney's reputation as a corporate giant swallowing everything in its path. But as history unfolded, that background joke became more than just a gag. It became a moment fans would look back on with shock. Because more than 20 years later, what once seemed absurd actually came true. Disney announced the acquisition of 21st Century Fox, a deal worth more than $70 billion, transforming the entertainment industry overnight. And suddenly, that tiny background detail from a 1998 episode became legendary. To understand why this specific prediction is so fascinating, we need to look at the context of the late 90s. At that time, both Disney and Fox were thriving in their own unique ways. Disney had just come out of its Renaissance era, with animated classics like The Lion King, Aladdin, and Beauty and the Beast. It was already a powerhouse, dominating not only movies but also theme parks, television, and merchandising. Fox, on the other hand, was known for its edgier content. It was the home of The Simpsons, The X-Files, and blockbuster films like Titanic. The two companies represented different corners of the entertainment world. To fans in 1998, the idea of these two giants merging felt as impossible as oil mixing with water. But the writers of The Simpsons saw the humor in exaggerating reality. They understood that corporations were always hungry for expansion, always looking for ways to dominate their competition. So, by inserting that joke sign into the episode, they were simply highlighting the absurd idea that even Fox could one day become just another piece of Disney's empire. It was a smart, satirical observation about the corporate world, and yet it turned out to be eerily accurate. What makes this prediction even more powerful is how subtle it was. It wasn't the main focus of the episode. It wasn't a joke the characters talked about, or a punchline meant to get laughs from the audience. It was just sitting there, waiting in the background like a hidden clue, and that's what fans find so fascinating today. Because unlike predictions about Trump or smartwatches, which were part of the actual storylines, this one was almost invisible. It required no attention at the time, yet in hindsight it became one of the clearest examples of The Simpsons predicting the future. When Disney officially announced its acquisition of Fox in 2017, fans immediately resurfaced screenshots from that 1998 episode. Social media exploded with side-by-side comparisons of the real-life news headline and the cartoon gag from 2 decades earlier. It was one of those rare cultural moments where people didn't just laugh, they were stunned. Even mainstream news outlets picked up on it, with headlines reading things like, "The Simpsons did it again," and "The cartoon that predicted Disney's biggest deal." Once more, the line between comedy and prophecy blurred, and The Simpsons' reputation as a predictor of the future only grew stronger. And this episode also speaks to the brilliance of the show's writers. They weren't fortune tellers, they weren't psychics. What they was deeply observant. They had a talent for looking at the world, noticing trends, and then stretching those trends to their most exaggerated possibilities. In 1998, Disney's power was undeniable. So what's the most outrageous possibility you could imagine? That even their competition, even a massive studio like Fox, might one day be under Disney's control. And what was once exaggeration ended up being reality. This is why the "When You Dish Upon a Star" episode remains such a critical piece of Simpsons lore. It is not just about the gag itself, it is about how art can sometimes reflect the future in ways nobody anticipates. It's about how satire, when sharp enough, can become prediction without even trying. And in this case, a single background joke became a glimpse into one of the most important business deals in Hollywood history. When Disney announced that it was acquiring 21st Century Fox, the world of entertainment stopped in its tracks. This wasn't just another business move or another corporate handshake behind closed doors. This was the kind of deal that would reshape Hollywood forever. Worth a staggering $71.3 billion, it became one of the largest mergers in media history, a seismic shift that altered the landscape of film, television, and pop culture in ways people are still feeling today. At the heart of this historic deal was Disney's relentless ambition. By 2017, Disney had already built itself into a global empire, stretching across movies, television, theme parks, merchandise, and streaming platforms. But even with all that power, there were gaps in their portfolio. Franchises and intellectual properties that Disney didn't own, but desperately wanted to bring under its control. And that's where Fox entered the picture. 21st Century Fox was home to a massive library of films and shows, some of the most iconic in entertainment history. The X-Men franchise, Deadpool, The Simpsons, Avatar, Family Guy, Alien, Die Hard, the list went on and on. Fox owned networks, production studios, and international assets that gave it a reach Disney couldn't ignore. For Disney, acquiring Fox wasn't just about buying a competitor. It was about seizing control of stories, characters, and entire universes that could strengthen its already massive grip on global entertainment. The deal was first announced in December of 2017, and the numbers were jaw-dropping. Over $70 billion was on the table, making it one of the largest acquisitions in entertainment history. To put it into perspective, that's more than the GDP of some countries. And while many mergers tend to fade into the background for average people, this one became a headline everywhere. Because everyone understood that Disney buying Fox wasn't just about corporate strategy. It was about the shows and movies audiences loved. Fans immediately realized that their favorite characters, their favorite stories, and even the future of blockbuster cinema were now tied to the House of Mouse. One of the most talked about aspects of the deal was the fate of Marvel characters. For years, Marvel fans had dreamed of seeing the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, and Deadpool join the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But the problem was that Fox owned the rights to those characters, which meant they were forever separated from the Avengers and other heroes in the MCU. Disney's purchase of Fox changed that overnight. Suddenly, those characters were back under Marvel's control, and the possibilities for future movies became endless. The potential of Wolverine standing side by side with Spider-Man, or the Fantastic Four teaming up with Iron Man and Captain America, sent shockwaves through fan communities. It wasn't just business. It was the kind of change that shaped imaginations. But the merger went far beyond superheroes. Disney now owned James Cameron's Avatar franchise, the biggest box office success in cinematic history at that time. They gained control of The Simpsons, a show that had ironically predicted this very merger 2 decades earlier. They took over FX, National Geographic, and Fox's international television networks, giving Disney unprecedented global power. And with the rise of streaming, these assets were crucial for Disney's biggest modern project, Disney+. The acquisition also raised serious questions about monopolies in the entertainment industry. For decades, Hollywood had been defined by the competition between major studios: Warner Brothers, Paramount, Universal, Fox, and Disney. But with Fox absorbed into Disney, that competition shrank. Critics worried that too much power was being concentrated in one company's hands. Would this reduce diversity in storytelling? Would smaller studios be crushed under the weight of Disney's dominance? Would the entertainment industry become less about art and more about corporate control? These were questions debated fiercely in media and among fans. Inside Hollywood, the deal also had a very human cost. Thousands of employees at Fox lost their jobs as Disney reorganized the company, merging departments and eliminating overlap. While the merger was celebrated by executives and shareholders, for many workers, it meant the end of careers and the shattering of long-term professional communities. For them, this wasn't just a deal between billion-dollar corporations. It was personal, it was painful, and it was life-changing. Still, from a cultural standpoint, the Disney-Fox deal became one of the most significant entertainment stories of the 21st century. It was more than a merger. It was a statement. Disney had gone from being a studio built on fairy tales and animation to becoming the single most dominant force in global entertainment. Owning Marvel, Pixar, Lucasfilm, and now Fox, Disney positioned itself not just as a player in Hollywood, but as Hollywood itself. And every new franchise they gained became another piece of their empire. The timing was also crucial. With streaming platforms like Netflix and Amazon Prime reshaping how audiences consumed content, Disney was determined to secure its own future. By acquiring Fox's content library, Disney armed itself with one of the largest catalogs of shows and movies ever assembled. This wasn't just about box office power, it was about long-term dominance in the streaming wars. Disney knew that to compete with Netflix, they needed more content, more recognizable titles, and more control over the stories audiences craved. The Fox deal gave them exactly that. And yet, beyond the business strategies, beyond the billions of dollars and the corporate restructuring, what fascinated people most was how The Simpsons had called it years earlier. That one background gag in 1998 suddenly seemed prophetic. Fans couldn't resist connecting the dots. It was as if the deal itself was not only a turning point in Hollywood, but also a living piece of evidence that The Simpsons' strange power of prediction was real. The Disney and Fox merger was not just a financial transaction or a corporate reshuffling, it was a cultural earthquake. The shockwaves of that $71 billion deal spread far beyond Wall Street, far beyond the boardrooms of executives. It touched the very core of Hollywood, the movies we grew up with, the television shows we love, and the way stories are told on the big screen and the small screen alike. One of the most immediate and obvious impacts came in the world of superheroes. For over a decade, Marvel fans had lived with a painful split. The Marvel Cinematic Universe, carefully, crafted by Disney, was thriving, giving us Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, and the Avengers. But at the same time, Fox held on tightly to some of Marvel's most iconic characters: X-Men, Deadpool, and the Fantastic Four. This meant two parallel universes existed, with no hope of crossing over. Fans could only dream about seeing Wolverine standing shoulder to shoulder with the Avengers, or Deadpool's wild humor colliding with the seriousness of the MCU. That dream felt impossible, locked away behind corporate contracts and legal red tape. Then, the merger happened. Overnight, those characters returned to Marvel's hands. Suddenly, the impossible became possible. The entire Marvel Cinematic Universe had new life, new potential. Fans began speculating endlessly online, drawing theories, fan art, and predictions about when Wolverine might make his debut, or how the Fantastic Four could be woven into the fabric of the MCU. For millions of people, the Disney-Fox deal wasn't just business, it was hope. It was the unlocking of a future where the biggest heroes could finally share the same screen. But superheroes weren't the only ones affected. Disney also gained control of Avatar, James Cameron's groundbreaking epic that had become the highest-grossing movie of all time. With Fox gone, Avatar became part of Disney's kingdom, and the upcoming sequels turned into Disney projects. Suddenly, the world of Pandora was tied to the same company that owned Star Wars and Marvel. For audiences, this meant that some of the biggest blockbuster franchises in history were now under one roof. It was almost unimaginable. Star Wars, Marvel, Pixar, and now Avatar, all owned by the same corporation. Television also changed dramatically. With the acquisition of Fox, Disney became the owner of The Simpsons, a show that not only entertained generations but had ironically predicted this exact merger 2 decades earlier. Beyond The Simpsons, Disney also took control of other major shows like Family Guy and networks like FX and National Geographic. This gave Disney unprecedented reach across television genres, from adult comedy to documentary programming. It wasn't just about dominating movies anymore. Disney had planted its flag across every corner of entertainment. Then came the world of streaming. Disney knew that the future of entertainment wasn't just in theaters or on television. It was in digital streaming, where Netflix was already leading the charge. The Fox deal gave Disney a massive library of content, a weapon in the streaming wars. From classic films to hit shows, Disney suddenly had the ammunition to supercharge Disney Plus, making it a serious competitor to Netflix, Amazon Prime, and later HBO Max. The merger wasn't just about what audiences would watch in theaters. It was about what they would binge at home. But the impact wasn't all positive. As Disney grew larger, concerns about monopoly and diversity of voices in Hollywood began to rise. For decades, Fox had been one of the Big Six studios, competing with Warner Bros., Paramount, Universal, and Disney. With Fox absorbed, the competition shrank. Fewer studios meant fewer perspectives, fewer risks, and potentially fewer opportunities for smaller, more experimental projects. Critics worried that Hollywood would become less daring, more formula-driven, and more focused on billion-dollar blockbusters at the expense of unique storytelling. Behind the scenes, the merger also had a human cost. Thousands of Fox employees were laid off as Disney streamlined operations and eliminated overlap between departments. For many, it wasn't just a headline, it was the loss of livelihoods, the end of careers built over decades. While the public celebrated the idea of Marvel crossovers and streaming content, the reality for those inside the industry was more complicated. The merger gave birth to excitement and possibility on one side, but it also brought uncertainty and pain on the other. Still, from the audience's perspective, the Disney-Fox deal changed the way we see the future of entertainment. It blurred the lines between companies, universes, and even genres. Suddenly, the biggest characters in popular culture weren't scattered across different studios. They were united. It gave fans endless possibilities to imagine, speculate, and anticipate. It redefined what blockbuster meant. because now a single studio controlled nearly all of the franchises that had dominated the box office for years. This merger also reminded everyone of the sheer power of intellectual property in the modern age. Stories, characters, and franchises weren't just entertainment anymore. They were assets, billion-dollar investments that could shape entire industries. Disney understood that, and by acquiring Fox, it ensured that it would not only dominate the present, but also the future. And at the center of all this transformation, people couldn't stop pointing back to that one small gag in a Simpsons episode from 1998. The joke that once made people laugh suddenly became one of the most remarkable predictions in pop culture history. For fans, it wasn't just that Disney bought Fox, it was that The Simpsons saw it coming, long before anyone else did. When the Disney-Fox merger became official, it wasn't just boardrooms and business magazines buzzing with the news. It was ordinary people, fans, and pop culture communities across the globe. It felt like the internet exploded overnight. Everywhere you turned, social media was ablaze with reactions, memes, debates, and endless speculation about what this deal meant for the entertainment they loved. It was a moment when corporate news turned into a cultural event because the impact wasn't abstract or distant. It was personal. It affected the characters, stories, and franchises that millions of people had grown up with. The very first wave of reaction came from pure shock. People couldn't believe that something The Simpsons had joked about in 1998 was now a reality. Screenshots from the old episode flooded Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, side by side with the official headlines announcing Disney's $71 billion acquisition of 21st Century Fox. Fans shared those images with captions like, "The Simpsons did it again," and "They really predicted the future." That connection between satire and reality gave the news a surreal quality. It didn't feel like just a business merger. It felt like stepping into a world where cartoons had foresight, where comedy sketches became prophecies. That alone made the story unforgettable. But after the initial shock, the excitement began to build. Marvel fans were the loudest voices in the room, and for good reason. For years, they had dreamed about seeing the X-Men in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They had argued in forums, created fan trailers, and speculated endlessly about what would happen if Wolverine, Professor X, or Deadpool could exist in the same universe as Iron Man and Captain America. And suddenly, the dream was no longer a fantasy. It was possible. Fan communities lit up with theories about how the characters would be introduced, how storylines might change, and when Marvel Studios would finally announce crossover films. For fans, it wasn't just corporate news. It was the key to unlocking their imaginations. The memes also came quickly because the internet never misses an opportunity to laugh at big events. Jokes spread about Mickey Mouse, collecting, franchises like Pokémon, with images of him holding Thanos' Infinity Gauntlet while snapping his fingers to acquire Fox. Others made mock posters of future films, showing Deadpool crashing into Disneyland, or Homer Simpson standing in front of Cinderella's castle. The merger became more than news. It became a pop culture phenomenon, celebrated and mocked in equal measure through the language of the internet. But not all fan reactions were positive. Some people worried about what this kind of consolidation meant for creativity. With Disney now owning so much content, fans questioned whether the diversity of tone and style they loved in Fox's productions would survive. Shows like The Simpsons and Family Guy, known for their edgy and often controversial humor, felt like the opposite of Disney's polished, family-friendly image. Would Disney tone them down? Would it censor jokes, push writers to soften content, or even cancel projects that didn't fit the brand? These questions sparked debates that lasted for months. Some fans feared the merger would make entertainment safer, more predictable, and less daring. And then there were the more nostalgic reactions. For decades, Fox had been its own giant in the entertainment industry, a studio with its own unique history and identity. Movies like Die Hard, Home Alone, Titanic, and The Sound of Music all came from Fox. For older fans, hearing that Fox was now part of Disney felt like the end of an era, like watching one of the last great independent Hollywood giants disappear into a larger machine. It was bittersweet. Excitement for the possibilities of the future mixed with sadness for the loss of a familiar name in movie history. Online communities also began speculating about specific franchises. What would happen to Avatar? Would Disney's marketing power turn the sequels into even bigger box office juggernauts? Would The Simpsons, now technically Disney property, end up in Disneyland rides and merchandise? Fans joked about Homer Simpson standing alongside Mickey Mouse in parades, or Bart tagging the walls of Cinderella's castle. For many, it was funny to imagine these worlds colliding, but beneath the humor was a genuine curiosity about how these properties would be treated under Disney's control. As weeks turned into months, the conversation shifted toward streaming. Fans realized that with the Fox library in its pocket, Disney Plus would become one of the most powerful platforms in the industry. Suddenly, people began wondering how this would change their viewing habits. Would classic Fox shows be available on Disney Plus? Would new reboots or spin-offs appear? Would Disney use Fox's properties to dominate the streaming wars against Netflix and Amazon? These were no longer hypothetical questions. They were possibilities people actively discussed, debated, and speculated about online. The pop culture buzz also reached celebrities and filmmakers. Ryan Reynolds, the star of Deadpool, joked on Twitter about how his R-rated anti-hero character would now technically belong to Disney, a company famous for its squeaky clean image. He posted humorous images of Deadpool wearing Mickey Mouse ears or sitting next to Disney princesses. Fans loved this self-aware humor because it captured the surreal nature of the situation. Characters and properties that felt so different were suddenly family under the Disney umbrella. What stood out most, though, was how personal the reaction felt. Normally, business mergers and acquisitions are stories reserved for financial news outlets, the kind of headlines only investors pay attention to. But this one was different. Fans around the world cared deeply because the deal wasn't about numbers on a balance sheet. It was about the worlds they loved, the characters they grew up with, and the stories that shaped their lives. The merger made people laugh, worry, celebrate, and argue all at once, proving just how much entertainment means to us all. Whenever people talk about The Simpsons and its shocking ability to predict the future, the conversation always ends up in the same place. Is it all just coincidence, or is there something deeper going on? The Disney-Fox merger is one of the clearest examples of this mystery. A simple background gag in 1998 ends up mirroring one of the biggest entertainment deals of the century. For many fans, it feels impossible to brush that off as random chance, and that's why the mystery behind these predictions continues to spark endless debate. To some, the explanation seems obvious. The writers of The Simpsons are some of the sharpest minds in comedy and satire. They spend their days analyzing culture, politics, and business, exaggerating real-world trends and playing with ideas that seem absurd in the moment. With more than 700 episodes produced, covering every imaginable topic, it feels inevitable that a few of those satirical exaggerations will eventually align with reality. By that logic, the Disney-Fox prediction was nothing more than a joke about corporate greed that just happened to come true years later. But for fans, that answer isn't satisfying, because it's not just one or two predictions. It's dozens, maybe even more. From Donald Trump's presidency, to the invention of smartwatches, to the Higgs boson particle, to events like the COVID-19 pandemic, the list of so-called predictions keeps growing. Every time something major happens in the world, people rush to comb through old episodes of The Simpsons to see if the show had already hinted at it. And far too often, they find something eerily close. It's reached a point where the phrase, "The Simpsons predicted it," has become part of our culture. Something people say half-jokingly, half-seriously whenever big news breaks. The Disney-Fox deal only made the mystery more powerful. This wasn't just a funny guess about some far-off possibility. It was a direct hit, a background gag showing Disney owning Fox more than 20 years before it happened. And unlike other predictions that were part of the main plot, This one was so subtle it almost went unnoticed until the real deal was announced. That subtlety made it feel even stranger, like it was hidden there on purpose, waiting for the future to catch up. This is where theories start to swirl. Some fans genuinely believe the writers of The Simpsons have some kind of insider knowledge, that they understand the patterns of politics, business, and culture so well that they can map out where things are headed decades in advance. Others take it even further, suggesting half-seriously that the show has access to secret information, or that the writers are time travelers planting Easter eggs from the future. Of course, these theories are more entertainment than fact, but the fascination they create is very real. People want to believe there is something magical or mysterious about a cartoon that seems to know too much. There's also the psychological side of it. Humans are wired to find patterns, to connect dots even when those dots might not mean anything. With so many episodes of The Simpsons in existence, you can almost always find some moment, some frame, or some joke that resembles something happening in the present day. Once the internet amplifies those connections, it feels like prophecy. A single screenshot can go viral, convincing millions of people that The Simpsons predicted the future yet again. In a way, the audience themselves play a role in keeping the mystery alive. Still, the question lingers. How many times can you dismiss it as coincidence before coincidence starts to feel like something else? The Disney-Fox merger wasn't a small event. It was one of the largest corporate acquisitions in history. For a cartoon to throw that into the background of a single scene, decades before it came true, is enough to leave anyone wondering. Maybe it's not prophecy, maybe it's not time travel, but it certainly speaks to the brilliance of the show's writers. They saw the trajectory of entertainment, understood the hunger of corporations like Disney, and took that trend to its extreme. What they couldn't have known was that the world itself would follow that script. This is the mystery that makes The Simpsons so endlessly fascinating. It blurs the line between parody and prediction. Was the Disney-Fox gag a satirical exaggeration of corporate greed, or was it a flash of genuine foresight? Was it a coincidence, or was it proof that sometimes comedy can capture the truth of where society is heading more clearly than anything else? The truth may never be fully answered, and maybe that's why the fascination never fades, because the fun isn't just in the prediction itself. It's in the mystery, the speculation, the questions that have no clear answer. Every time another prediction seems to come true, the legend grows. People share old clips, compare them to modern headlines, and marvel at how a cartoon from the 90s could have anticipated the shape of the 21st century. And each time, the mystery deepens. Was it luck? Was it sharp writing? Or was it something far stranger? The Disney-Fox merger sits right at the heart of that debate, proof that sometimes the wildest jokes have a way of becoming reality. When people look back at the Disney-Fox merger years from now, they will remember it not just as a business deal, but as a cultural milestone forever linked to The Simpsons. Out of all the predictions the show has made, this one stands out because it didn't just reflect a funny exaggeration of the corporate world. It became a living piece of history. The moment the merger was confirmed, headlines around the globe framed it not only as a financial story but as proof that a satirical cartoon had once again outsmarted reality. And that has become the true legacy of this prediction. The way it transformed how audiences view both the show and the strange relationship between comedy and the future. The legacy begins with the power of pop culture memory. Think about how many mergers and acquisitions happen every year in the business world. Most of them are forgotten by the general public, tucked away into financial reports that only investors follow. Yet this one was different. People didn't just remember that Disney bought Fox, they remembered The Simpsons calling it, out 20 years earlier. That association turned the merger from a corporate headline into a cultural legend. And because of that, the Disney-Fox deal is permanently tied to the show's reputation as a prophet of modern times. It also solidified The Simpsons as more than just entertainment. For decades, it had been a comedy, a parody of American life, a reflection of culture. But after the Disney-Fox prediction came true, it took on a new identity in the eyes of fans. It became a kind of cultural oracle, a show that wasn't just commenting on the world but somehow predicting its path. Every future event that resembled a Simpsons gag only strengthened that image. The legacy of this prediction wasn't only about accuracy, it was about changing how the world interpreted a television show. The merger also highlighted how satire can sometimes be more insightful than serious analysis. Economists, analysts, and industry insiders didn't see the Disney-Fox deal coming decades in advance. But The Simpsons did, through the lens of humor. That's part of what gives this prediction such staying power. It reminds us that comedy, in its exaggerated and ridiculous form, can sometimes capture truths that serious voices miss. That idea has become part of the show's legacy. Its writers didn't just make people laugh. They made them think about what could be possible, even if the possibilities seemed absurd at the time. There's also a generational element to the legacy. Fans who grew up watching that 1998 episode as kids later witnessed the merger as adults. For them, it wasn't just a funny coincidence. It was a surreal moment of déjà vu, as if a childhood cartoon had followed them into real life. That sense of continuity created a bond between viewers and the show that transcended time. It made people reflect on how much The Simpsons had been part of their lives, not only as entertainment, but as a strange guide through history. The Disney-Fox prediction became a symbol of nostalgia colliding with reality, a reminder of how deeply pop culture embeds itself in personal memory. The legacy also extends into how people talk about corporations and entertainment today. Whenever Disney makes a new acquisition or expands its empire further, fans instinctively joke, "Check The Simpsons. Did they predict this too?" The show has become shorthand for the absurdity of corporate power. Even though the prediction was made in jest, it now serves as a cultural touchstone whenever the topic of Disney's growing dominance comes up. The joke has become the lens through which people understand real corporate history. Another dimension of the legacy lies in how it changed the perception of predictions in storytelling. Countless shows have tried to comment on the future, to satirize trends, to imagine what might come next. But none have embedded themselves into reality as powerfully as The Simpsons. The Disney-Fox merger is now cited in documentaries, news articles, and fan discussions as the ultimate example of how art and life blur. It has inspired new conversations about the role of writers, the unpredictability of history, and the uncanny ability of satire to hit closer to truth than anyone expects. And beyond all of that, the prediction's legacy is tied to the conversation it still sparks. Fans debate endlessly online whether it was luck, foresight, or something more mysterious. Was it just a joke about corporate greed? Or was it a moment of genuine clarity about where the world was headed? These debates keep the legacy alive because the answer isn't clear. It's not about whether the prediction was intentional. It's about how it makes people feel, how it captures the imagination, and how it leaves audiences questioning the boundary between comedy and prophecy. The Disney-Fox merger itself has already reshaped the entertainment industry, but its cultural aftershock will always be remembered through the lens of The Simpsons. The show didn't just predict the future, it shaped how people experienced that future when it arrived. And that is the true legacy of this prediction. It wasn't just about what happened, but about how we interpreted what happened, and how a cartoon joke became part of history's narrative. When we step back and look at it all together, the Disney-Fox prediction isn't just a quirky gag from an old episode of The Simpsons. It's a symbol of something much bigger, the way satire, comedy, and storytelling can sometimes cut so deeply into reality that it feels like prophecy. A background joke about corporate greed turned into one of the most iconic business headlines of the century, and in doing so, it forever changed the way people see The Simpsons. For some, it's simply a case of sharp writers exaggerating real trends until the future finally caught up. For others, it's a mystery, one that raises questions about coincidence, foresight, and the strange power of pop culture to shape our understanding of the world. But no matter which side of the debate you're on, one thing is undeniable. the Disney-Fox prediction has become part of history. It is not just about what The Simpsons said. It is about how the world reacted when that joke became reality. And maybe that's why this story resonates so much, because deep down, we're all fascinated by the idea that the future is hiding in plain sight, waiting for us to notice. Whether it's sharp satire, brilliant foresight, or something far stranger, The Simpsons has left us with a legacy that blurs the line between comedy and prophecy. And the Disney-Fox merger will always stand as proof that sometimes the wildest jokes are the ones that come true.